Hello and welcome. I'm Allison, and today we're going to talk about embodying our lungs. First, we're going to start a little bit with structure just to orient. We'll go through a little bit of function and then have a small practice at the end that can help you get in touch with your lungs and their health. So our lungs are asymmetric left to right because we've got the heart. The heart sits a little bit to the left. There's 2 lobes of the lungs on the left side and 3 lobes of the lungs on the right side. And if you think just for a moment about the surface of the lungs, sometimes when we visualize them, I think many of us think that the lungs are just somewhere in the center of the chest and on the front of the body. But the lungs actually cover a surface area all the way around the sides of the body and the back underneath the shoulder blade. So if you are someone who, if you would roll your shoulders a little bit and you could feel the movement of your scapula, under that is your rib cage, and then under that there's layers of fascia, and then that's also lung tissue. If you were able to bring your fingers into that little hole at the top of your collarbone or your clavicle here, if you could reach down about an inch or so, that would be the top of your lungs. And then the bottom of your lungs comes down almost to your waistline, definitely where your ribs contain them. So some of us even have a rib cage that will go almost all the way down to the bony margin of the pelvis. So if you're available right now to do this, you can just check out just briefly where your rib cage margin is, how far down it goes, especially on the side and in the back. The back of the rib cage, there's 2 sort of half ribs where the respiratory diaphragm attaches. That's in the back, and it's way down where you might consider the top of your hips. If you feel, again, the top part of your collarbone, if you could reach in there and you take a big inhale in, you could let that breath rise all the way up to this part of the clavicle. So the lungs also are left and right, and the left side makes room for the heart. So there is a massage between the organ tissue of the heart and the lungs on the left. And how we take air in, once we breathe in, the air goes down through the trachea, which is behind the sternum. So you can think of the sternum bone here. If you could go deep behind that, you'd be at your trachea, and then the trachea branches off into bronchi, and it looks just like branches of a tree. So you got the trunk of the tree, and then you have the branches going left and right, and then those branches become smaller and smaller, and in the lungs there's a lot of these little end parts of the branches called alveoli, and that's where the exchange of our oxygen, once we get it all the way down to that level, that's where it's exchanged with the blood, and it goes through the heart, and then it pumps oxygen through the body, and then the CO2 as a waste comes back in through the alveoli, those little spots, and then we breathe that out. And I think one of the coolest things about this process is our lungs resemble, it's like an upside down tree that grows into the branches of our lungs, and we are in constant exchange with trees outside, especially now that we've got our deciduous trees leafing out. Well, every time we breathe out the CO2, leaves take in CO2 and sunlight and of course water from their roots, and they perform photosynthesis, which helps the trees live, and then they exchange the oxygen, and then we breathe that in, and that goes down through the sort of upside down tree out into the branches of our lungs. So the lungs are essentially an exchange or a station. It transforms and exchanges gases. It is a big surface area. It has the ability to pump and massage the heart. And one of the coolest things about the lungs is they can also act independently from the rib cage. So if you're breathing, I think sometimes when we engage in respiration, we breathe, we feel our rib basket expanding. And then as we exhale, we feel the rib basket going smaller and smaller, and then the lungs sort of get smaller and smaller. So one of the features of breathing is that when we're inhaling, as we get that bigger space, the respiratory diaphragm, which is at the bottom of the rib cage, it opens downward, kind of like an umbrella opening up. So if you could imagine, when you take a big breath, your rib cage expands, your lungs expand, and then that whole umbrella of a diaphragm opens up down into the pelvic cavity, umbrella opening, things get bigger, and then as you exhale, the diaphragm kind of domes back up again. And it's like, instead of an umbrella closing, I like to think of it kind of just the umbrella coming up the other way. So when you exhale, and you exhale fully, there's a bit of a compression. So breath is not only that exchange with the outer environment and the aeration of our lung tissue and down through the bronchi and the trachea, but it's also an organic massage. So a full exhale out, if you keep going with that, you can also feel that it's like a pandiculation or a small squeezing of the lungs, and you can even direct that focus. You could give a little squeeze and feel that massage of the heart tissue, and then you could even direct your next breath into a portion where you're feeling, that needs some attention or a little bit of constriction. So in the same way that we'd work with our skeletal system and our muscular system, you can also work with your organ system. I find that organs really do respond well to conscious intention. And even if we're giving some attention, say we would close our eyes and think about the surface area of our lungs and the function of our lungs and how they interrelate with the environment, so it really connects us to the earth. We can also do a few easy activities to help juice the lung tissue and to think about them. One way that organs also respond, which is a little different than our muscular tissue, is that organs are somewhat hold this space between solid and fluid. They are solid, of course, but they're more watery. They're more like a water balloon. So that's a different consistency, and because there is a fluid content to our organs, they respond really well to vibration. So vibration and sound has the ability to kind of jiggle and wiggle our organs. So organs respond to sound, they respond to intention, they respond to the kind of movements like wiggling and jiggling. So if you were dancing, or if you even you see animals do it sometimes, you just kind of shake out a little bit. That's at an organ level, because the organs, they're a bit fluid. So when we start to get our consciousness into our organs, there is a bit of a shift of consciousness or change of consciousness that we can find as we're seeking our relationship with the organs. So as we go through this practice, this short practice for the embodiment of the lungs, if this is your first time accessing organ consciousness or even thinking about this, just know that your intention is enough. It is okay to just start this process if you're not used to accessing the organs. And just know that the more that you spend time feeling into the layer of your organ and having the intention to reach that and be curious about them, the more they're going to come to light for you, since each organ has a consciousness, and each of those consciousnesses has an ability to have a relationship with your brain consciousness. So we'll just start by getting comfortable seated. So at this time, you could sit on the ground. If you've been sitting a while, you can change the cross of your legs. You could even get a chair, or if you're sitting at home on a couch, you can do that too. Just try and sit up a little bit so you can get this 3D or three-dimensional perspective of your body. So first, we're just going to go into a few natural breaths. And if it's comfortable to close your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes here. In a gentle somatic yoga practice or somatic practice, we want to just get a baseline or an anchoring observation first. So just naturally breathe in and out and notice the length of your inhalation. And notice the length of your exhalation. Just making note if one feels longer than the other or easier than the other in any way. And then be aware as you're breathing, just notice without changing anything, what's moving and what's participating as you breathe. And let your breath be as it is, but if you can at this moment, begin to bring some conscious awareness to the surface area of your lungs. On the front, on the side of your body, and in the back of your body. Just allow your breath to keep moving. As you're holding that vision and that curiosity about that surface area of your lungs. Just seeing for you today how deep into the body, into the torso, maybe even the waistline, how deep in your body your lungs are. And seeing if your lungs can have a presence in your back. Can you feel how the lungs have a back body? How they can relate with the rib basket in the back. Maybe even your shoulder blades. And how about that space underneath your armpits, all the way up? The side of your rib basket. Letting your breath be easy, it's sort of exploratory. So maybe your breath can find relationship with the lungs, all the way up the side of the rib basket into the armpits. And then maybe even through your collarbone. You're thinking the very top of your lungs. Just making note there's also bone and muscle and fascia. And you're wanting to just settle into a deeper layer, the lungs at the very top of your chest. Continuing to breathe, and if you now can maybe imagine the trachea or that tree trunk that's behind your sternum, and however it looks is just fine. Just getting that awareness that when you breathe in, there is a vessel that carries that air and it's central behind the sternum. And if you follow that central air, that air can then go all the way out into those smaller branches of your lungs. If you give that air a chance, you might be able to follow one of those vessels. And know that as air is coming in, there's a transformation and a movement and a sliding and a gliding. And that even if a little place doesn't feel smooth to you, there's a lot of opportunities for air. So you can imagine accessing maybe another one of those branches. Or maybe as you're breathing in, those branches just become clearer or lighting up in some way. There's a lot of branches there, a lot of opportunity. those branches are going to a very small end point, kind of like a tree branch might go to a bud or a leaf. And you might think about bringing or following that breath or energy out to the very end, where there's an exchange of oxygen that then travels to your heart and is pumped or moved through your whole system. So knowing that each time you slow down or follow a big breath in, you have agency in this process. You're part of this process that's happening. It'll happen without our consciousness, but with it, the energy shifts a little. You can follow that and feel. And then, as that cycle circulates around, the alveoli will take in the CO2, and we've got a process of breathing out. Now, if you were breathing out and you just follow that breath out to the very end, could you imagine just a small pandiculation or just a very small contraction at the end of that exhalation? Just feel that for a moment. It's like breathing out, and then there's a little, not muscular squeeze, but it's like everything is small and massaging each other. Maybe a little pause. And then when you're ready, breathe back in. In the moment, enjoying the lungs and also feeling that relative volume shift. And now we're going to add one more component to this. So just make note, and you can still do this with your eyes closed. As you're breathing, or as you were breathing, is there any space in your lungs that felt like it was a little more challenging for the air to move through or to reach? So just take a moment to do a body scan. If you need to breathe in and out, once again, you can. Maybe finding a spot that you'd like to work with that seems to need a little attention in your lungs. Could be the front, the side, or the back. Once you've identified that spot, we're going to use our own sound and vibration and consciousness into that spot. So when we breathe out this time, we're going to breathe all the way to the end of the breath. So it's going to be like, breathe out. And then at the end, we'll make a hissing sound that sounds like tss, or like steam, kind of like a teapot. And that sound you're going to direct into that area at the end of your exhale that feels like it might need a little vibration, or that might feel a little sticky to you. So let's go ahead and give that a try. So let's take a first cleansing breath in. And a breath out. Keeping the place that you want to work with in mind. Now breathe in, creating volume and space. And then breathe out. Towards the end of your exhale, start that hiss. Feel the pandiculation, or that small kind of contraction in that area you're focusing in. At the very end of that, Use your breath right through that territory. Breathe in. And as you exhale, find that hissing sound focused in that territory. Breathing in. And let's take 2 or 3 more at your own pace. And then after 2 or 3 more, go back to your normal breath, more of a global breath, and see what that feels like. Just notice any shifts or changes. And just notice for yourself if there's anything curious to you about that spot or space you were working with your breath. As you're breathing now, and the deeper you go into this study with your lungs, and you start to resonate and open some territories to consciousness, it's very natural then to have a next spot that feels a little denser, or that could use some attention. So if you like to pause here, go ahead and pause the video, and you can also go into now 1 or 2 more other territories that feel like they need some assistance. A word of note though, at any time with breath exercise, if you're feeling lightheaded or it feels hard, that you've been expending a lot of breath or you're a little bit dizzy, that's a really good sign to stop and pause. So in gentle somatic yoga and with our somatic practices, this is about cultivating awareness and health, and we want to diminish anything that feels like force or doesn't feel quite right. So notice how that went for you, and be kind to yourself as you continue on if you choose to do this breath more. We're going to do 1 more movement for the health of our lungs, and also for the awareness of how our lung tissue is different from our fascia and bones and muscles of the rib basket. So when you're ready, make sure that you're still feeling comfortable seated. Also, just take a breath in, maybe an easy breath out through the mouth. And this next time we breathe in, I want you to take a nice big breath, like you're trying to puff out your rib basket. Again, just to your comfort, but you're going to breathe in. And imagine, you could think about making yourself big, so you're really buffering out your rib cage. And then exhale. And the idea here is that we're trying to get the lungs, the bones, and the muscles and the fascia to all like puff out like a puffer fish. So you're going to breathe and kind of puff out, and if you can, pause there for a second, puff out, and then slowly let that go. Same goes for this too. If you feel woozy or dizzy in any way, then do less, do a lot less. Let's try puffing out 1 or 2 more times. Try to get all directions. pufferfish. And then as you exhale, you're going to get that little, just a natural massage. Let's do one more. Okay. For this one, I think consciousness is the most important thing with this, not if you're doing it right. So the idea of this is that we're going to breathe into our lungs and our rib basket. We're going to expand like pufferfish. And then we're going to hold out the rib cage, the intercostals, and the muscles of the skeletal muscular system. And then we're going to let the exhale happen. And we're going to let our lungs and diaphragm deflate. And you might like to imagine that you're creating space between the rib basket and the lungs. And imagining that space again can be just as powerful as actually doing it. So let's give it a try. So we're going to puff ourselves out with an inhale. Hold out. Keep that holding out as you exhale. And imagine the lungs are massaging or contracting in as your rib basket is staying broad. And then rest. And maybe breathe out. In between these sets, take a natural breath in and out. Really check in with yourself here. So we're kind of practicing with our brain as well as the tissues. Because if we don't think about this, it is most likely that our organ tissue, the fascia around the lungs, the skeleton, and the muscles, they're all kind of sticky with each other. They're moving together. So let's try that maybe 2 or 3 more times where you're puffing out first, letting the skeleton and the muscles stay puffed out, but maybe feeling an internal contraction or a little massage as you exhale the lungs. Make sure you rest in between each set. And then when you feel complete with this, we're going to go back to our normal breath. If you feel comfortable with your eyes closed, go ahead and close your eyes. Allowing our awareness to come back to that anchoring movement, which is just a normal breath in and out the nose. And just be aware for yourself how your lungs feel in this moment. How about your breath? Anything different for you? Then go a little more globally as you're being aware of your breath and your lungs. And just take your whole body into your consciousness and notice the quality of your energy just as a total body system in this moment. Noticing the quality of your presence. From this point, if you've been sitting with me and it feels like it would be nice for you to lay down and take Shavasana, or if any way you're feeling a little lightheaded, or you're getting, you've got more oxygen in, go nice and slow. You might want to lay down first before getting up. Or if you feel ready, after this practice, just gently stand up, and before doing anything else, just take a walk across wherever you're at, across the room you're in, and do this same kind of study, standing up. Making sure that you're breathing as you're walking, and also just studying now after spending several minutes, just several minutes, and focusing in your lungs and with your lungs. How does that change the quality of your presence when you're standing and walking? Thank you for tuning in today, and take good care. Namaste.